Right. We're good? All right. So I want to welcome everyone to the first of several meetings and work sessions that we have, information sessions on the Middle States process here at NJCU. Let me introduce myself first. My name is John Melendez. I'm currently a professor in the Education Leadership Department and also serve as program coordinator for our doctoral program, Community College Leadership. My co-presenter is Ben Roden, who serves as the Associate Vice President for Enrollment Management. And we serve as co-chairs for Standard 4 of the Middle States process here at NJCU, support of the student experience. And so what we hope today to do is actually, this is a listening session and feedback session. And so it's an opportunity for us to listen and get feedback from you on the work that we began about a year ago and trying to prepare for our April 2020 visit by Middle States. Before I continue and get into the substance of our presentation, I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the leadership and the strong work by Sue Gerber, who is our chair of the Middle States Committee, and her two able-bodied support and brother and sister at the helm of this process, Dr. Tracy Ammerman and Dr. Fran Moran. The three of them have provided exemplary leadership in keeping us on task, keeping us on focus, and actually covering our backs when sometimes we fall short on some of the deadlines. All of us obviously have full-time jobs as faculty member administrators, and trying to juggle and multitask sometimes causes us to slip a little on timelines, but they've been very, very patient with us in helping move this process forward. So as I said a little earlier, this is the first of several presentations that our community is being invited to be part of this process. And so while our focus today at this moment is on Standard 4, you should know that the Middle States process really involves an opportunity for the university to do a self-reflection on where we're at using the lens of the Middle States review process. And so Middle States currently has 7 standards. For those of you that have been here for other Middle States visits in the past, once upon a time there were 14 standards. And so over the past few years, Middle States has refocused and been able to summarize those 14 standards into 7. And so today, or this morning, we'll be talking about the support of the student experience standard. Currently, this process for us began in January of, let me double check here, of 2018. It's been a while, and so, and time goes fast, and it was actually, now that I think about it, over almost a year and a half, 15 months ago, that all of us were volunteered to be part of this process. No one was coerced, no strong arms. President Henderson and Provost Julius sent out a call for volunteers, and I think people knew that this is an important process to be part of and seminal to the function of the university. And so following that meeting in January, we put together groups, and what this slide kind of tries to show you is the work that we've been doing over the past 15 months. Drafting, looking at the proposal, developing the proposal, looking at our particular standards, meeting regularly with our subcommittees, and then having the subcommittees go out and really reach out to the community for input to start looking at, from each particular standards lens, if we're up to snuff, if we are meeting in good, if we have good practices, and if we're meeting the standards as defined by Middle States. So the blue line brings us to March 1st and kind of tells you where we're at, conducting these open meetings. The hope is that you will provide us some feedback on where we're at. You've had the opportunity, hopefully, to read the draft that was posted and distributed by Dr. Gerber. And, and today we provide an opportunity to give you a quick overview of what those are and how we've approached this process. But this process is only beneficial and helpful to us if we get feedback. it's really easy for us to get kind of tunnel vision, stuck in our offices, reading these documents over and over again, and kind of maybe missing things. And so hopefully, through this process, you'll feel empowered to contribute and highlight things that maybe we're over-focusing on or things that we've missed, not because it wasn't there, just because we got kind of that tunnel vision moving forward. So the idea is that in the next 3 to 4 weeks, you'll provide us some feedback. Based on that feedback, Ben, myself, the committee will get together, integrate that feedback to the report, and then prepare for the next iteration of the draft, which I think is going to be in August of this year. So, and then the process continues. So just to be clear on what Standard 4 is about, it's the support of the student experience. And so I'll just read this, and then I'll give you my own take on what this means. So across all educational experiences, settings, levels, and instructional modalities, the institution recruits and admits students whose interests, abilities, experiences, and goals are congruent with its mission and educational offerings. The institution commits to student retention, persistent completion, and success through a coherent and effective support system sustained by qualified professionals, which enhances the quality of the learning environment, contributes to the educational experience, and fosters student success. So I'm going to cut to the chase, and just in terms of our initial review, I think that we clearly meet the standard. NJCU has a robust set of structures, administrative, budget support that demonstrates that we are working really, really diligently in this area. I think NJCU has a strong history of having the X's and O's, what I call the logistics, right? The anchors of a strong enrollment management process. And concurrently, we have, I think, historically had strong student support services to really address the needs, both academic and social needs of the students that we accept. So the standard actually has 6 particular criteria. And these are the things, again, drilling down a little bit more of what we're looking at. So the way we've organized ourselves, and the next slide, I think, has the names of the members of our subcommittee. But what we did when we met collectively as a group is we assigned 2 committee members to each criteria. So having, again, while we're all sharing information together, we thought it would be important to have 2 people just focus on each criteria. So we have the ethical policies and processes to recruit students and admit students, including transfer students. Processes to place and support students not prepared for university-level study. Orientation, advising, and counseling services to support retention. Processes to support degree completion and job placement. Procedures to for safeguarding of student information. Periodic assessment of activities, of effectiveness of programs supporting the student experience. So as I read each of those criteria, and hopefully whether you're a faculty member, staff member, executive member of the leadership team, I think when I read these things, I start thinking about elements that are part of our practice. Everything from robust transfer matriculation agreements to robust student support systems, for example, the EAB platform that we're using, to the creation of new orientation operation led, I think, by Anthony Surratt. The improvement, the recent improvement and trending improvement in our graduation rates. The stewardship provided both by our registrar's office in making sure that we're following FERPA, to our counseling and medical service, health services offices to make sure that we're complying with HIPAA, to all the great work that's done and performed by IT to ensure that our student information systems and our Blackboard system, learning management systems are secure and protect the privacy and rights of both our students and our faculty. And of course, obviously, assessment, which is a key component across the institution. A lot of it actually led and supported by our Office of Institutional Effectiveness. So as we move forward and been looking at what we've been doing, we've been fortunate to have the individuals highlighted on this slide as part of the members of our working group team. And so out of respect for the time that they've put in, I feel obligated to mention their names, even though they're here. Dr. Aaron Asker, our VP and Chief Operating Officer. Sharifa Abdallah, a Program Assistant in the Provost's Office. John Blanchard, Director of the Hub Tutoring Center. Jada Feliciano, a Student Rep. Abisala Gallagher Hobson, our Director of our Counseling and Wellness Center. Dennis Lynn, an Assistant Professor in Counseling. Sabrina Magulio, I hope I got that right. She's Interim Director of the Opportunity Scholarship Program. Ann Scarnello, Administrative Assistant in Fire Science. And finally, Camille Tyler, an alumni. And so all of us have been meeting either virtually or face-to-face over the last 15 months to get us to this point that we are today. So at this point, I'm going to turn over the mic to my colleague and friend, Ben Roden, who will talk about some of the key findings.
Thanks, John. So I think we're going to, just as a reminder, our roles here while we are faculty and, is the microphone not on? Just to remind you that our roles, even though it's faculty and administrator here, our role here really is, it's kind of researcher, scribe, reporter on what we're seeing rather than us providing analysis. So for those of you who had a chance to spend some time with the draft document, this is essentially a collection of information and our kind of summary of what we collected from the various offices and members of the community that we thought were relevant to Standard 4. So just some key findings or observations from our own kind of research is that enrollment services are well coordinated and delivered at the university. Significant institutional resources have been focused to improve student experience and outcomes since the last self-study. There have been many new programmatic initiatives for undergraduates, as many of you know and work on tirelessly. Many early assessments indicate real progress in these areas. Sure, I can get closer to the mic. Hold on. Is this close enough? Still much to do to meet student success strategic goals, particularly as they relate to retention and graduation rates. I think this is, again, probably the primary focus of many of these offices. And there appears to be limited focus on graduate student experience in our kind of study thus far, and I think something we plan to focus on following up on over the next weeks and months to come. Graduate student marketing and recruitment is an area that appears to need prioritization, where there has been a lot of emphasis on the undergraduate side over the last number of years. And student concerns regarding mental health needs should be assessed. I think it's kind of been an ongoing issue. It was also in our last self-study, and I think an area that we continually want to kind of take a look at. Coordination and review of outcome assessment activities in student services. So those are kind of the main observations that we had as we went through all of the kind of documentation that we collected. But I think really at this point, we really want this, the purpose of this session is to kind of get your feedback, for those of you who had a chance to kind of read through the document and or just have your own thoughts about these. This is a time for John and myself and the rest of the committee to kind of hear what you're thinking about in terms of student services at the university, and so that we can make sure that the final draft reflects kind of the full community's feelings about this standard.
So if I could add, and if you'll indulge me, I'm going to just keep the last two slides up, just maybe you can have a chance to kind of read it again and maybe look at it through the lens of your disciplinary professional perspective. So I want to share, full disclosure, that this is my third middle states process here at NJCU. Seems like it was only yesterday that I was 20-something starting to work here. But the opportunity for middle states, I know it oftentimes is characterized as a real stressful period. The middle states process is part of essential to a university's existence. Without receiving a successful accreditation visit, the university will be at risk of losing Title IV ability to participate in Title IV programs, which are financial aid programs. But that critical reason to do a middle states review process aside, really it's just a good business practice, right? I mean, we should be looking at what we're doing, questioning ourselves in an honest way to assess, are we doing the things we say we want to do, through, for example, through the lens of our mission, through the lens of best practices. And so what we've been trying to do is look at ourselves with a critical eye, not just to have this be a rubber stamp saying, yeah, we're doing great on every single thing, because while our heart and our efforts are always to try and do great things, you know, no organization is perfect, and no organization, as much as it works really diligently at trying to address all of its needs, there are always going to be areas, because of limited resources, because of sometimes maybe having too many priorities, sometimes loses focus. So what we've seen so far, and the key findings that we've been able to identify are the ones that are on these two slides. And so certainly, I think that we've all seen over the last few years our focus on student success initiatives. I think we're starting to see the positive results on that, even though it's one of those things where sometimes you take 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But I think that if you look at how we've been working as an organization, there really has been a lot of smart people working, leaning in on trying to address these issues. But at the same time, we can see where there are gaps. So we've realized by looking by interviewing different offices that currently we see a gap within the graduate education area. And that's one that I think is one that we have to acknowledge and then kind of move forward to then see if if Middle States reviewers agree, then hopefully we'll be able to begin prioritizing that as an institution. So as Ben said, part of the value of this is to now maybe get us some feedback from you guys. Is the evidence presented? If you've had the opportunity to look at the report enough to convince reviewers that we meet standard 4? Is there anything missing? And so even if you haven't had the opportunity to read the report as that's currently drafted out there, just intuitively, in your areas of function, do you think there are things that, and knowing that this standard really, in summary, looks at this student on this enrollment management as one major element of this standard, and the other one is the student development support area. Are there any areas that you think the NJCU either needs to do or is doing really well, and it's important for us to hear from you? So if not, I'm going to start picking on y'all.
So I'm going to move this microphone into the camera area for any of those who would like to come up and ask a question. Not putting extra pressure on you. Is that okay for the producers of this event?
So no one wants to volunteer, and that's fine. I think, again... Yep, okay. We have Dr. Bill Montgomery, an esteemed faculty member from our Earth Sciences Department.
The loudest voice on the planet and hearing aids to boot. So this is going to be a question, John, for everybody at Middle States. Love the fact that you're focusing on what might need to be done in the future. My question is for all of us, how important might it be to at least set the stage for some potential interventions, such as a framework for ongoing assessment of student mental health? And I would also, as a science guy, I would tell you that there's a lot of research that's developing that says the affective side of the brain, the emotional, all this stuff we're talking about, mental health, is maybe as, if not more important than the logical side that we talk about. And I see this day after day in my ongoing experience with what I do. I usually tell it the way I have to do is get the students talked off the ledge first, and then when they're kind of relaxed enough, then you can kind of get them to, start absorbing some knowledge. But so that back to the main issue is, how important is it going to be for us to look proactive in terms of, we've got some issues, but we've also got some ideas as far as how to move forward. And, so the question is, how much do we have to do with that? How detailed? That's probably a tough question, but I figure I might.
I think that's number one, I think that's a fair question. I think that you're really kind of already kind of following the trail, right? I mean, we've seen over the last few months this issue being highlighted by students, whether it's in the Gothic Times newspaper, or their outreach to Dr. Jung and the dean about a perceived lack of sufficient professional resources within our counseling office. Certainly the issue of mental health is one that is increasingly coming to the fore within the higher education landscape. And so I think that, and I think we face that straight on within the draft that we prepared so far, where I think where we have a specific reference that Dr. Jung is in the process of getting an external consultant to come in and really look at at our current counseling modeling model to see if it's nimble enough, if it's resourced strong enough for today. So I can say that, and many of you may know that I was former vice president for Student Further Enrollment Management at NJCU for 9 years. The model that we had during the 80s and 90s and even the 2000s might have been appropriate for that period in time. Is it appropriate for the world that we live in today? To be determined. And I think I like the use of the word model is really giving us an opportunity to check that. And so I think that we know that as the institution goes from having about, I think, 260 students living on campus to we're about 600 students living on campus? Just under 600 students on campus. That alone kind of points to what kind of mental health services, social work services, what kind of referral resource services do we have in place to ensure that our students are being supported in that aspect of their lives. So certainly, I mean, the literature on student development and, not just from the traditional 17 to 20 age your college student, which has always been kind of pointed toward, the issues of maturation and kind of transitioning into adulthood is present and increasingly going to be an issue at NJCU as we expand our residence life population, but also just the day-to-day factors of the complicated lives that our adult students have. Our students come in with a whole host of challenges that are part and parcel of living in a highly urbanized, highly competitive, highly multitasking set of lives, which oftentimes kind of produce those issues that, and again, I think you're right. Now in my role as a faculty member, it's not uncommon for me to help to talk students off the ledge. And when I think about ledge, not literally off the ledge, but Dr. Melendez, maybe I need to drop this class because I got all these other things, and I got to say, no, listen, we can work with you. We'll meet you where you're at. But in addition to that, making sure that we have the appropriate referral sources and the appropriate mental health counseling services on campus. So I think that's a legitimate issue and it's one that why it's on our kind of a radar.
And I would only add that I think this is, in this process, what we're trying to do is to tease out these questions. If you think that these issues are underrepresented in the self-study, we can either kind of go back and start to kind of flesh that out in the document, or it may be that later on this becomes part of a recommendation that we provide that needs to be considered moving forward. So there is a process at the end of this where we make recommendations for Middle States to actually kind of consider, and this may be an area where we really want to kind of address.
And along those lines, I mean, really, that's really where the value of this process is. Those, after going through this 2.5 year of introspection, preparing to have these external, non-biased reviewers, and let me just say, to be clear, this is not an adversarial relationship. This is a peer review process, right? So they come in and they either validate some of the great things that we're doing, or they say, listen, you guys are maybe blowing this up a little bit greater than where you're at. You're really not, and they kind of allows you to kind of get the reality check. But one of the best things I think about this process are those recommendations, both the self-recommendations that either get validated or not by the review team. So then oftentimes those recommendations set the stage for the institution's next strategic review process or the next budgeting process to say, listen, we had these external people come in and said, these are gaps, and now we need to try and address those gaps. Well, what's interesting about the Middle States review process is that it's gone from a 10-year review cycle to an 8-year review cycle, and so there's going to be a little bit more accountability on the institutional end to try to be able to demonstrate in an evidence-based way how they're addressing those issues. Any other observations, comments? If not, we'll throw out, discussion question number 2. what could the university do to improve related to Standard 4? So, Dr. Montgomery shared one. Is there anything else that you see, whether it's on issues of group communications? Is it an issue of, do you agree that there is a gap that we can strengthen with regard to graduate? Or do you think, by and large, the institution is on the right track? And silence would be like applause to us. That means that you think. Right, and I'm sorry, to the online audience, you have an opportunity over the next 10 days to provide feedback. So I know there'll be a link, I think, at the end of this presentation that you'll be able to, and also to all of you, that if you feel more comfortable sharing your thoughts privately, we welcome that input. Any other questions or? So, and I'm looking at, I set my timer up to see how long. We're at 28 minutes. And so while we set aside an hour, doesn't mean we have to use an hour, obviously. We'll maybe let you know what the next steps are in the process. So we're looking to get your feedback over the next, I think 10 days is the official period that it's open. However, you should know that both Ben and I myself are always available. The J. Melendez at njcu.edu, B. Rodin at njcu.edu for either to set up meetings or just to provide us direct feedback, or using the feedback forms that will be available. Actually, it says here for 5 days. Trust me, we're going to always accept feedback. And so we do have additional sessions scheduled. Today is one of those where we're going to try and get through 2 other presentations. So following this presentation, the Ethics and Integrity Standard will do their presentation, then followed by the Educational Effectiveness Assessment, the next one anyway. And so then we have 3 more on March 22nd. So, any other questions or comment?
Can you go back a slide, please?
Whoop.
I hate to come back up. What about
Sure.
retention?
I think retention is always going to be an issue, and I think that's one that's always a challenge.
But that's the single biggest issue that this is almost, to me, it's almost an existential issue at this point. So
Right.
I just would hope that we are really all on the same page with the severity of the issue. And
So now you're speaking to the inner enrollment manager in me. And so I can tell you, and I was really, when I looked at the data that we've been able to present in regard to retention, number one, I'll say we're never going to be good enough, right? We're always going to be challenging ourselves. But if you look at the data, and it's on page 4 of the current draft, from 2013 to now, we've ranged between 74 and 73% retention rates for first-time, full-time freshmen. And when people hear that, it means different things to different people. As someone that's kind of lived in this world for most of my professional life, I think that if you do an apples and apples comparison to other institutions like NJCU, we're doing pretty well. Doesn't mean that we're doing well enough, because the fact is that retention really is the lifeblood of the institution. Also, just the other metric that follows retention real close are graduation rates. And so we see that our most recent graduation, 6-year graduation rate is at the highest it's been in the last 5 years. We're now just shy of 40%. I think it's 39.4%. That's a tremendous accomplishment. Some of it is done by good work and by all of us. A lot of it's been done by policy changes that when we went from 128 credits to 120, some focus by departments to be more streamlined. I think the degree audit stuff that we're working on, the focus on advisement. But that being said, I couldn't agree with you more that we cannot sit back and say, well, we're doing as well as our peers. I think NJCU has always been committed, and if you look at our mission, is to really serve the population we can at the best way we can. And so I think that while, and maybe, I'll take a bullet for Ben and for the guys and all the men and women that are working in that office. But I think that we have solid retention program in place, but I also think that as we expand our residence life programs, as we try to build campuses, whether it's at Fort Monmouth or whether we're expanding our programs on our waterfront campus, that retention is critical, and that we need to really be mindful of that and be consistent and continue to put the resources to make sure that we can get that metric up higher than what it is. I apologize if I sound a little bit defensive on it. But.
No, I mean, and I think that also fair to say that while we feel good about a lot of the work that's been done over the last number of years to address kind of what this is kind of central to our current strategic plan kind of issue and probably a lifelong issue for the university, I think I would find it hard to believe that we won't wind up putting a recommendation in the document that we should continue to invest in these areas around student outcomes.
So we know, for example, that our OSP program has been a model retention program. We know that our TLC program has been a model retention program. So I give a lot of credit to the institution for the investments it's made over the last few years with the SOAR office, with Project Ascend, trying to take the best practices of those two, what I'll call best practice programs, and try to make them part of the everyday experience for all our incoming freshmen. Certainly, those programs require a lot of funding. Both the OSP program and TLC program receive external funding from the federal and state. They're relatively small cohorts, but I think that university, I would actually say that that's an excellent effort that the university has made in trying to focus on that. But now we need to try and find additional funding to make those summer bridge programs available, to the same type of intensive counseling support that our students that are in those other two programs that are supported by federal and state funds, if the institution can really have dedicated funds to try and mimic those best practices. But I appreciate that feedback. Yes.
This is just a question, and I appreciate everything that's being done in relation to both recruitment and retention. Do you keep statistics on the impacts on retention of readiness for college, the qualifications that students present at admission? Do you see a relationship between those?
So I think the question, I'll repeat it, is do we keep data on the success via retention for students that come in maybe with some remedial developmental issues? Is that kind of paraphrasing correctly? Is that fair?
They may be quite capable with their previous experience.
Right. So I mean, I don't know that data off the top of my head, but I know that our IR office can dice and slice it. And maybe, and I think maybe the takeaway for me is that maybe that's some data that we should look at specifically within the report and address and talk about it specifically if there is a gap. So so to the point when, and this is kind of, if you read between the lines in what we've drafted so far, we share data on Project Ascend and also on SOAR. And we see there that these are students that, quite frankly, are those that are coming in with some academic weaknesses. And there, so far, the metrics they lag, in my mind, significantly behind students that are either participating in our two programs that maybe where they parallel in terms of academic ability, both the EOF and the TLC program. I think their retention rate, two-semester retention rates are in the 50-some-odd% range. That's significantly under the, I think for the TLC it's between 85 and 90. I think for our EOF, consistently between 75 and 80. So that's an issue that I think maybe we need to maybe look at more honestly and maybe frame that as an area for needing improvement.
So, and I'll just say that there is an area in the document that it addresses developmental education, and to the extent that we can go back and add some of that data, student outcome data around for students in developmental coursework is available, right? It's readily available, and so we can certainly go and put that information into the document if you think that it's not well represented enough in the document.
So my goal really is not to criticize the students who are being admitted. If I put down my chin and stood up. Thank you. But as you're looking for areas where you say you're going to pay additional attention, I think that if the statistics justify it, that we could do a great deal in terms of paying extra attention.
Right. No, and I agree. And, you know, and I think that's why it's important that we have these sessions, because look, just as I think it's human nature that when we were preparing for Middle States, we want to, you know, get ourselves all made up, right? Put the best face forward of NJCU. And the danger in doing that sometimes is not looking at our, you know, the little wrinkles we have or whatever, or our shortcomings. And so I think that, I think what I always appreciate especially about from faculty, is that tend to be more open and honest and looking ourselves about, you know, all the great things we're doing, but also our warts and where we can do better. A lot of times as administrators, the tendency is to try and just really show the best face of NJSU, in part because that's part of what your role is, right? As an administrator is to, you know, shine up the apple. We're recruiting students. We want to go to the external community, whether you're in fundraising, whether in whatever aspect as an administrator. But faculty, it's where the rubber meets the road, right? That's what you're with our students. You see the challenges. You see the frustrations they have when they're not able to accomplish their own personal goals, and you start wondering, well, if we accepted them, we have a social contract with them to make sure they have the resources to do well. And so I appreciate the comments, and I think we'll go back and make sure that we look at that in a more honest and maybe self-critical, and maybe that's not the right word, but I'll use that word for now. And if we go overboard in being self-critical, I'm sure someone will say, dial it back.
What I would like to see is more collaboration with the different resources to maximize the efforts of our students and exactly what they're getting, rather than individually. Just kind of a little more collaboration with the different resources.
So Queen, I couldn't agree with you more. And while we're still in the process of coming up with recommendations, one that I'm trying to start formulating in my mind, and one obviously that, you know, once I get it fully articulated, even though I think your articulation is probably the direction I'm going in, you know, talk with Ben, then pull the team together. I think that the issue of, and this is my speak, that there may be too many silos currently at the institution that aren't allowing for that cross-fertilization and cross-divisional work that maybe at a different time was more parcel of the process. So once upon a time, NJCU had things like a strategic enrollment management committee where you had all of the players at the table once a month discussing issues, making sure the left hand and the right hand knew what they were doing. We also had, whether it was on, I remember being on many committees when we were doing capital construction projects. And you had people from the various, whether it was academic departments, the admin and finance people, student affairs people, talking about, okay, we're going to build this project. Are we making sure that it's meeting our needs? Or why are we building this project? Oh, we're going to we're doing a fine arts building? Are we all kind of understanding why we're doing that, how that's central to our mission, what are the benefits in terms of potential income from public-private partnerships? They may be happening, and again, I'm in a different role now, but I think that kind of maybe gets to some of what you're talking about. Obviously, I think from a student support perspective, that's one that we probably need to sharpen our pencil and figure out how we maybe articulate that in the report, but I think it also speaks to, I think, a growing concern that maybe we've become a little bit, too siloed, maybe because we're doing so many different projects that sometimes it's just hard to get everyone together in the room because everyone's got 5 different major priorities they're working at the same time. But I'm happy that I'm glad that you mentioned that, because I think, at least as the current draft is constructed, we're silent on that, and I think maybe we need to revisit that.
Yeah, I was going to echo that. I think that some of those cross-pollinating structures do exist, but we don't describe them in the document. That's a good observation. We should probably go back and take a look at those things. Yeah.
Thank you, Queen. Any other questions or observations? And I'm really happy because it looks like we're getting closer to this. We're at 42 minutes. So for those that know me, I'm like the OC.
Who has an 18-minute question?
It's not so much a question. It's more of a, I don't know how granular you plan on getting with, in terms of the recommendation for more, to look into graduate marketing and the student experience in that part of it. But I guess maybe it is a question, were you considering looking into graduate assistance as a separate entity from the graduate student experience, just because it does touch on, the recruitment factor? It's supposed to be, your best and your brightest. And I'm just wondering, as far as, seeing a graduate assistant's academic experience and how, technically speaking, right, graduate assistantships are supposed to benefit those students academically, and maybe if there's any plans for assessment separately from just the general grad student population, or how we could use that for graduate marketing. It's more of just to crack any tunnel vision, or just to throw it out there as a space.
First of all, I'm going to ask if you want to just kind of send Ben and I like a paragraph, 4 sentences on what you just described, because I think that kind of speaks to the silence so far on the graduate experience that we have in the draft we prepared to date. I'm not going to put Nerdan on the spot, but I guess I am, right, Nerdan? I know that in the end of last semester, there's an initiative to relook at our graduate assistant program. And in fact, for those of you that, I mentioned earlier that I'm Doctor Program Coordinator for our soon-to-be-launched Community College Leadership Program. And our new faculty member has talked, we're going to make a pitch soon to the provost and to Nerdan about trying to get doctoral level grad assistants, because we think that is also part and parcel of developing a doctoral program, a doctoral culture at an institution. And I see Dr. Schamberg, who's helps lead the educational technology doctoral program, and I know that's also probably on their wish list also. So, but I think you hit the nail on the head that there's a gap. But I don't know if just in terms of our own information, if there's anything you want to share where we're at with the graduate.
Before you do, I was just going to say that one of the things I think we can take back from that question is there's another standard that's taking a look at some of the academic experience, of which I think the graduate assistants are kind of in this maybe hybrid. It might be a good place for us to kind of go and have a kind of a meeting with our fellow co-chairs in that group to kind of really start to kind of talk about how we want to describe this in the document in general. So do you have anything you want to add? So.
I'm actually in the design and delivery to student experience as well. It is one of the graduate student experience is part of it. And talking about the graduate assistantship, we have established a committee in inviting all the people that are interested in the subject, as well as the graduate student itself. We are redesigning how we are going to application criteria, how we are going to assess it, and how we are going to allocate it. And of course, how we are going to measure their success, what type of experiences they are getting. So I think it hasn't been discussed before as openly like that. But from now on, I think we are actually having, Chris is one of them in the committee member. We are seriously working with it because it is very important and everybody wants to have them. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments or? So if not, I'm going to take executive privilege for Ben and I and thank everyone for taking the time out of a snowy Friday to be here. Again, they'll have opportunities over the next 5 to 10 days to provide comments and feedback. And we look forward to redrafting. And once we do the redraft, I'm sure it'll be distributed for further comment and feedback. So thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your Friday.
Stick around for the next session.
everybody. I do the teacher clap? Oh, good afternoon, everybody. I was going to do the teacher clap, but I won't. Good afternoon. I am Michelle Rosen from the Department of Literacy Education.
And I'm Lourdes Sutton. I'm the Associate Dean for the College of Education.
And we are co-chairing Standard 2, which is Ethics and Integrity. So we want to spend some time going over what we've done so far, what our process has been, and what our next steps will be. So as you can see here are a list of all the standards that are going in the Middle States accreditation process. We've been blessed with number 2, Ethics and Integrity. And we're going to go through a little more specifics. I guess we should tell you that each standard, so mission and goals, ethics and integrity, design and delivery of the student learning experience, support of the student experience, educational effectiveness assessment, planning, resources and institutional improvement, governance, leadership, and administration. So we're tasked with, as a university, committee-wise, covering all of these 7 standards. Oh, sorry. Okay. So what you can see here is a timeline of our work and what we've done so far and what still has to be done. So in January of 2018, we convened as a Middle States committee. That's when the teams were formed. That's when the co-chairs were appointed. And we started then. And in July, we gave the chairs of Middle States, Sue Gerber, Tracy Ammerman, and Fran Moran, gave a self-study to Middle States, and that got approved in July. So you can see that this process takes a lot of time. It's spread out over many months, and it's an effort given by a lot of people involved. So once that self-study got approved, we went into our teams, and we, by standard, and we created our own reports, which were draft form, and that was in October of 2018. And then we had a quick turnaround in January, or the end of December, I think? End of December from draft 1 to draft 2. So that took a lot of time on the part of each member of each team and each co-chair of each standard. I'll go into it in a few slides, or the next slide maybe, about how we actually worked, but I just want to go through the timeline first. Then the university, under the direction of Tracy, Sue, and Fran, held these open meetings that were open to the public for anyone to attend. We asked for feedback. We asked for anything that you thought should be in the report, and we shared exactly what we had done so far. Then in July, and that's where we are now. So these are these open meetings, and now our next step is in August, I think August something, is we had to submit that draft. So we've been working for the past 15 months as committees, as an entire university, asking for input to get this draft to Middle States. And then you'll see after the summer, we'll have a pre-visit. Then we'll submit a final, and then Middle States will come for their visit to evaluate. Did I miss anything? No. Okay. So I'm just going to read this so you know exactly what we're talking about. So ethics and integrity. Ethics and integrity are central, indispensable, and defining hallmarks of effective higher education institutions. In all activities, whether internal or external, an institution must be faithful to its mission, honor its contracts and commitments, adhere to its policies, and represent itself truthfully. So that's our job on Standard 2, is to prove that we do that and to find places where we can improve and challenges that we face as a university. So here are the areas that will be evaluated on under Standard 2. Commitment to academic and intellectual freedom, climate that fosters respect for all, fair and impartial grievance policies, fair and impartial employment policies, avoidance of conflicts of interest, truthfulness in internal and external communications, periodic assessments of ethics and integrity-related policies and practices. That's it. So that's a lot, right? So we have to create a report showing that we adhere to all of these things, and like I said before, see where some of our challenges lie and how we can move forward to make it a better environment. So this is our committee. So Lourdes and I chair it, and then Miriam Bendoud from the Department of Biology, Queen Gibson from the School of Business, Rick Mayel from the School of Business, Virginia Melendez from the President's Office, Scott O'Connor from the Philosophy Department, Tatiana Reyes from the College of Education, and Matthew Stieglitz, who's our university counsel. So we have a wide variety of content area, departments, positions, and I think we have to stress as chairs that this committee has had zero resistance to anything we've asked. They've worked their tails off. They've met every deadline and then some. They've done drafts and shared them with other standard committees to try and get feedback and then to give what we have, always looking to improve. We're sort of just manning the ship, but we do have to say that it's really been each committee member that has stepped up and really far surpassed any of our expectations. So we want to really give a shout out to everybody that's listed here for just making our job that much easier. So let me go back here for a second. So the way we did our draft, you saw on our timeline that we had to do a draft. So the way we did it in our standard was we created a live wiki so everyone could see what everybody was writing. So this way there was interaction along the process. So we created a wiki in Blackboard. Everybody had one of the criterion, and then everyone was responsible for one. They went and gathered all the information that they needed to gather from wherever office, whatever professor, whatever student. We surveyed students. We did a ton of data collection. And then we drafted our draft on a live wiki so everyone could see it. And then we gave each other feedback, and then we pulled it all together. So this process went on over a couple, months, almost, over a year of just getting all of what we thought we needed to get done. It's probably still needs more work. It's a work in progress. It's by far not complete fully, but it's a really good start, thanks to everybody here. And the idea of all of us collaborating and doing everything together was a really key component to the way that our committee worked, because we were able to see all of our work at all times. We didn't have to attach things and send them back and forth. So I think that was helpful.
Okay, so I just want to reiterate what Michelle was saying with regard to our working group. They were so, let me go back, get their names up there again, absolutely fabulous. I mean, I can't say enough about the work that they did, coming to meetings, meeting deadlines. We met repeatedly. Everyone was really cooperative and worked so hard. We never would have been able to get this done without your unbelievable efforts. So just another shout out. I had to say it, I couldn't help it. All right, so I'm going to go over just a sampling of our key findings. Hopefully you read our draft, which was included in Sue Gerber's email. I hope you had a chance to look at it, because this really is just like a sampling of, we had a lot of findings. So let me just jump in. So with regard to diversity, we found that the university, both the students and faculty, staff, managers, put a lot of value on and respect on our diversity. We saw that through some survey data. We saw that through the MSCHE, which is the survey that the students take with regard to their satisfaction, and there's questions on there about their feelings of respect and feeling included and part of the university community. And also there's coach data for our faculty and staff that showed the same, that they felt valued and that diversity was something that was really something to be honored here at the university. And then we have some other, by the way, part of the ethics and integrity standard is to look for evidence that we have practices, processes, procedures, policies in place. So it wasn't for us to look to judge anything, but just did we have the procedures in place to ensure that we could meet the standard of, the criteria that are under the standard of ethics and integrity. So just for clarification on that. So we started doing some digging on some other efforts around diversity, and we found that the president has an initiative, the President's Diversity and Inclusion Council. We meet 4 or 5 times a year, and I'll talk a little bit more in in a future slide of how that committee has been helping with the diversity. The Women's Center for Equity and Diversity, they do, of course, a lot of advocacy around diversity. They do safe zone training, a lot of different initiatives that come out of there with regard to diversity and inclusion. And of course, the Hagen Center, which is, been with us for some time and is committed to diversity on campus. The last, I'm going to have to, let me just see, there it is, okay. So with regard to the last statement, the university can continue and expand its efforts to recruit racially and ethically diverse faculty. So hopefully you can see this. So this is the data that we gathered with regard to the demographics of our faculty, our managerial staff, and our classified staff. And as you can see, there's some work to be done here. We really have to raise, some numbers. We are a Hispanic serving institution, yet our Latinx faculty percentage is 9%. Right, so there's definitely work to be done there. I referenced the President's Diversity Council. Their part of our charge is to work on this. Because we understand that we really, our faculty need to look more like our students do. So there are efforts underway in HR. There are efforts underway through these different committees and groups that are doing work to raise these numbers. Same with the African American faculty percentage. It's too low, so we have to bring that one up as well. So yeah, so we're finding, and it's okay, it's good that we found it. So now we know that there's serious work that needs to be done around this. Okay, so with regard to affordability, access and affordability for our students, we found that we have a really robust set of resources for students, and we have some survey data that indicates that 87% of our students are really highly aware of the financial aid resources available to them in order for them to be able to come here and stay here. And then there are some new initiatives too. Well, there's some, I'll skip around a little bit. There's, the long-standing, we have scholarships, the FAFSA, but then there's some new initiatives as well that we started, the Debt-Free Promise Program, which is a program that guarantees if there's a certain family income, I believe it's 60,000 is the number, that students, once they receive all of their Pell money, their, what's the other one, Pell and Tag, that we commit to financing the rest of their education so that they can graduate and be debt-free. As we all know, college students are graduating with ridiculous amounts of debt. So this shows a real commitment on NJCU's part to try to provide students with access and not have to leave overburdened in debt. The textbook voucher program, in fall 2018, over 300 freshmen were given a $500 textbook voucher. And so that, we have that as being very helpful. I'm going to skip down. The emergency aid, that's an initiative from the President's office. So, and we might want some feedback from you with regard to that, because sometimes it's hard to think about, well, what's really an emergency, right? But we did disperse, or the President's office dispersed $1,600 last semester in emergency aid to students. And I mean, it varied. I know, I actually know of one student from our college who was, she didn't have food. So we made sure that during her, and we didn't find out about that until her cooperating teacher told us she was in the field doing her internship. And we found out that the cooperating teacher was bringing her a sandwich every day because she didn't have any food. So when we found that out, we were able to make sure that she had food.
I think we can add also, these are fairly driven financially, explicitly financial, but there are also not programs, but ideas that the president has done, such as opening the dorm for somebody who can't get home, or other things like that that are not usually giving them money, but helping them financially in a different way.
Financial aid, as you all know, provides extensive counseling services for students so that they walk them through the FAFSA filing. There are web links. There's all sorts of resources. They have a financial aid TV channel that students can watch, I believe. Oh, I forgot to mention. So anyone watching on YouTube, you can actually log in questions if you're so inclined. I mean, that's the point of this today, is that we share with you what we're doing, but more importantly, actually, we really want your feedback. So if are any comments from anybody who is visiting with us online, you can log in through YouTube and do that. Glad I remember to say that, okay. Oh, and then lastly, of course, support from academic advising. SOAR does a fabulous job. I think, Veronica, are you here? I thought I saw you before. I wanted to definitely give Veronica a shout out. OSP, the registrar, TLC, all providing all sorts of financial supports for our students. Support for academic freedom and freedom of expression, intellectual property rights are clearly articulated in policy and practice documents. What we did was basically comb the website, and everything is accessible with regard to these policies and procedures right on the website. There were times we had to make some phone calls, visit offices, but what we found was really we were able to find everything right on our website. The university has clearly articulated grievance and appeal procedures. Now, that ended up being a really interesting thing for us. To us, as a working group, the grievance and appeal procedures were crystal clear. They made total sense. But we decided to survey our students. So we surveyed 186 students, and 55% of them said they had no idea what we were talking about. So we were sort of stumped about that. We're not sure. We're going to resurvey students. We think that what we did was choose the wrong words. So in talking to students, we realized that they don't really know. They know that they can appeal their grade. They know that they can go and talk with their professor. They know that they can go to the dean's office. But we used the word grievance, and they weren't, we think, quite sure what that meant. We think it threw it off. So, but that's good, it's valuable data, you know. Maybe we have to revisit the way we word our grievance policy. You know, maybe it has to be clearer for students, not so clear for us. University has clear procedures for addressing allegations of discrimination based on membership in a protected class. I mean, many resources on that. We have our Title IX, we have Ethics Point, where, you know, people are free to report any sort of violation or problem. And of course, always the support of the EEO office. The university has clearly articulated hiring policies that include guidance for recruiting and the search process. Again, all of this is online, all of our hiring procedures. The search process is very consistent, very thorough. Every search committee is charged in the same way. The expectations are made very, very clear. The recruiting process is always, we always make sure to recruit diverse pool of applicants. We have the online software Taleo, where we use and we can collect all the data and collect all the resumes. So we found everything quite easily. The university has clearly articulated evaluation policies for staff and tenure, promotion, and reappointment policies for faculty. So the faculty handbook is a real resource, and these policies you can find them in several places, on the Senate website and through our HR website as well. And issues of conflict of interest are addressed through state policy, which is disseminated to all employees. Again, there's a lot in the employee handbook with regard to conflict of interest, and we also found some good, strong policy through our procurement office, and in the work that they do to ensure that there's no conflict of interest in the way that we do our business. NJCU periodically assesses criteria related to ethics and integrity. Projects underway to revise all policies and post on a central website. So we are looking at redoing our faculty handbook. Again, based on the data that we received regarding grievances, we're going to be taking a look at, you know, how can we make sure that that policy is clear for students. The MSCHE survey conducted every 2 years that assesses, as I spoke of before, students' perception of respect for diversity and inclusion and feeling welcome here on our campus. The Great Colleges survey showed that that's the great colleges to work for. So I guess, sorry, maybe I must have missed typing that in there. That was for our faculty and staff, and again, that showed that there was a very positive campus climate around diversity. I already spoke of our working group gathering data on implementation for those grievance procedures to clear them up for students and make sure students know, you know, what the procedures are and know how to proceed. And then Ethics Point, which I referenced before as well, which is a place where you can go, and if you feel that there's something that needs to be reported, this is the mechanism the university has in place, among others, where you can do that and do that in a safe, private space. So here's where you come in. So we believe, as a group, that we have met the criteria for our standard. But we'd like to hear from you, based on the presentation we gave today, do you think that we met our standard? And is there any feedback you can give us? Do you think there's different kinds of questions we should be asking? Or, I mean, anything at all? This is, the point of today is to share with you, but also hopefully that you can share back with us. And those online, remember, you can type into YouTube. Not to put anybody on the spot, but, you know, Michelle can take the mic over to you.
That's all right, I'll hold my tea. So when you looked to see if students were familiar with the grievance procedure. You actually asked them, and you got a response. When you look to see how familiar faculty are with all the written statements that are made about various things, conflict of interest, almost everything in that chart, did you assess faculty and staff's familiarity with those things? So they exist on campus, but are they actually in people's hands? And then just an addendum. The faculty handbook, I think, was published in 2009. I'm not sure that an update, or at least a re-examination to see if there needs to be an update wouldn't be helpful. But it's my first question that's most important to me.
Well, I can very quickly answer your second question. Yes, the faculty handbook will be revised. It was last published in 2009. Really, thanks to this self-study, we're finding out that kind of information, so we will be working on that. We did not survey faculty with regard to knowledge of the grievance process. We can certainly do that. I'm really glad that you raised that because that could be another data point for us. What we did was, as a group, look to see if we could find it. So when it was easily accessible to us, we felt the assumption was then it would be easily accessible to everyone at the university because, I mean, it really is, it's right there online. It's not hard to find at all. But we can certainly do some surveys for faculty. I think that's a really good idea. Because maybe we'll find that they're not as familiar as we assumed just because we could find it. So it's a good question. Thank you.
What type of question do you think we should be asking? Do you have something in mind? Is it just the grievance policy for student that we mentioned, or is there any other grievance you were thinking about?
More from faculty and staff point of view, because it seems to me a lot of those things related to that. And whether, so I wouldn't say I know faculty, and the answer was in the faculty handbook, and they had no idea how to access it or even whether it existed. So it's one thing to know that the statement exists and to go hunting for it. It's a different thing to have a problem and not exactly know where to go. So my interest is just in how familiar are people with these statements and where they're located.
I mean, I think we can certainly work with Sue Gerber's office to find a way to survey faculty and get that information. I think you're right. I think since we did find that for students, then maybe, maybe faculty, maybe we have to do it for faculty as well. So.
Can I just peel another layer back in regard to your question, Barbara? I hear that you're not asking if there is a policy in place. You're asking if there is a grievance, does the faculty member know exactly the steps to take to have somebody help them?
Right. Well, so the grievance was related to students. I hope that when faculty and staff have a grievance, they come to the union. And so you could publish that prominently too, the union contract.
Actually, it is, as I said, this is just a sampling of what we have. In our report, we do have data around AFT and what the procedures are for faculty when faculty have their, not necessarily with the grievance with regard to a student, but their own grievances. So the procedures are they're there and they're clear. But I see what you're saying about just making sure that faculty know that the resources are even there, and if they don't, maybe trying to find a way to help them find those policies.
Well, the last one said it was disseminated to all faculty. I mean, the last piece on that, there was some source of information that was disseminated.
Probably all the survey data?
Yeah, to all faculty. So I was just wondering, too, what was the process of dissemination? It may be that it appears on the website I mean, that may be
On the
answer to that, I
website,
don't know.
through, you know, a lot of our communications all go through marketing. And marketing, really part of their mission is to ensure clear, fact-based communications. They fact-check everything before we put anything out there. So a lot of our disseminations of information like that would be coming out of the marketing office. So via email and posted on the website.
Thank you.
The question regarding internal and external communication, how do you assess the quality of your evidence to know that you've met the standard? And is it just adequate enough to meet the standard, or can you exceed the standard? So there was a question there about internal, external communication, but I'm not seeing the linkages with the volumes of document and a particular criteria. So I'm kind of asking about the linkages and what's the process in tying these voluminous documents and that particular criteria. The one talk about the veracity of internal communication, and also from meeting the standard, is it just enough to meet the standard? And if we're just meeting the standard, should we comment on what could we do to exceed? Because I don't understand if we're just kind of floating right underneath the criteria of meeting it, because you've listed some strengths that we have. Are there opportunities for improvement so that we can exceed the standard, and maybe we don't need to exceed it, we just need to meet it? So those two questions.
Yeah, no, that's good. So per Middle States, we just need to meet the standard, right? For ourselves, maybe we do want to exceed the standards. One of the value in this is what we find out in the self-study, right? We're not perfect. No organization is perfect. So, of course, there's room to grow, and there are challenges, and that is all uncovered through this process that we're going through now, and there's always room for improvement. With regard to the internal and external communications, that all goes through the marketing office, and they have, they ensure that our communications are consistent and that they're clear, that everything is open and accessible. We post our graduation rates, our retention rates, our certification rate. I mean, everything is, it's all there. We have a right to know page. So all of those communications are available to anyone at any time, and the marketing office does, we find a really funneling it through there. They do a very good job of making sure that that our communications are correct and clear.
And I also think that when we first met as an entire Middle States committee, this question did come up. I don't remember who asked it, but somebody said, are we trying to find out if the policy is in place or if we're doing it well? And I think, like Lori had said, right now it was, is it in place? But that doesn't mean that even if it's in place, we want to find out if it's being done well or not.
I just want to acknowledge, this is Miriam from, she was on our working group, absolutely fabulous working group member.
No, since you mentioned, can I mention that we had the best leadership we could ever get? And it's totally honest, and we don't say it enough. I think it's one of the things that, going back to what you say, is, okay, we're trying to figure out, do we have, are we meeting all the recommendations? Yes, but okay, we are striving to try to get it better. And this is why we have this meeting today. We want to hear from all of you. We want to hear from everybody. If you have any recommendation, this is, so the first step was to say, what do we have in place? And if we see that there's anything that can make it better, and this is what we want to hear from all of you, these are the kind of things that we're going to add as recommendation for future improvement. So the key is, let's take a look at what's in place, let's take a look at what's missing later on, and work on how can we make it better. So yes, we want to go more than that, and I really appreciate what you actually brought up. And what do you think again, going back to what Barbara said, what type of question should actually be, we should include in those survey if we have to actually give a survey to faculty, and we will. I think this is a great point. What type of question would you want to ask that will help us achieve that goal?
I'm not sure what questions to ask, and that's why I'm here to learn. But it's how you define evidence and how you meet the standard. And for me, it's interesting that we are here. I've seen I see the criteria, I see the documents, I see the policy, but is it, and probably similar to Barbara, is it just having the policy? How do you have evidence to suggest that you're meeting the standard? And if you could have volumes of information and it may not necessarily integrate and tie to the criteria, how does the committee know that it's meeting the standard besides the volume tests? Because we see the volumes, you speak to the marketing department, but it wasn't clear on what actually meeting the standards mean based on this data, troves of data that you've gathered.
So it's about policies and procedures. I mean, that is what it's about. And the policies and procedures, they're there. They're accessible. They might need to be revised, like the faculty handbook that we found is going to need some updating. But yeah, am I answering your question?
The short of it is they're asking if the policies are there.
For example, and this is the last point I'm on this, because, for example, one of the standards is integrity and ethics. Have we created an institution of high integrity and ethics? Is having the policy enough? Is compliance with, I want to know, I don't know if you went deeper to say, here is the standard, here we have policies, does this committee go and look at compliance or non-compliance with these policies to further drive the point that we've met and we've created an environment, and that's just an example. Or is it just having the policy is sufficient rather than going a little deeper and understanding compliance or non-compliance with these policies? Do you do that or maybe not?
Well, at this juncture anyway, we are looking to just ensure that the policies are in place and that people can find the policies and that there are procedures. As we move forward on that timeline, we have another year of work to do. Part of, let me just go, if I go all the way back. If you look at the last standard, periodic assessment of ethics and integrity related policies and practices. So criteria 9 is about, then going in and on an ongoing basis, looking at, are we doing what we say we're doing?
We could talk about this all day, right? Because you can say, well, is the assessment in place? Or did the assessment prove that we're doing it well? So it's a circle.
Yes.
Maybe this just goes to an area in which you could argue maybe there's a bit of a gap between what we're talking about with the meet and exceed, and we could maybe try and think of ways to not just have things disseminated, but figure out ways to, put it under the guise of communication and somehow do a better job of communicating, and then, using data from surveys to show that there's enhanced communication or something like that. But I think that would be an excellent way to show that, yeah, we got an issue, but yeah, we also got a plan to move forward.
Right. Well, I appreciate you saying that because, again, part of today is to get this kind of feedback from you. Everything that you share with us today, we will take back to our working group, and our plan is in the next draft to incorporate this kind of feedback. So perhaps one of the suggestions we might make is around, doing more than just making sure it's there, going maybe that extra step to make sure that everyone's aware and everyone is confident that the processes in place are correct. So what could the university do to improve Standard 2? Like, what can we do as a working group?
This relates to the slide related to race and ethnicity of the faculty and staff, or of employees. Perhaps we would consider gender also in that.
Oh, okay. Do we have that demographic? Okay. I think that's probably a good point.
So building on that, I also would suggest that thinking this through a little bit more and then looking at maybe other places where they've run into similar issues of trying to get to some more parity with the surrounding community in terms of demographics, and maybe suggesting some potential models to look at or plans to move forward. So, like for example, in STEM, we would say something like, well, if we go to a Geological Society of America conference, we're going to make sure that we have tables set out so that we can try and recruit, more either women into the sciences or, folks of color, that kind of thing. So again, just a little bit more thought about, acknowledging that there's, a gap here, and then what might we think about trying to do to close the gap. And I think that just shows a proactive element that, is real and also shows some forward progress on an issue that clearly is an issue.
Right.
So.
Thank you. Are we getting any online questions? No? Must be more interesting things on YouTube, I guess. Anyone else at all? Anything?
Would it improve this chart if this is a point in time? And
Right.
probably be helpful to see the trend or a target, because this may suggest NJC, okay, with Latinos and African American, we may not have pushed or moved the ball down the field. But I think if you look at it, and I don't know if you can, over a 3-year period, you may see that we've made tremendous progress. We're still not there, but that may show some traction. And obviously, all these things are limited to or impacted by, resources. But I hope the needle has moved positively. And if not, maybe conversely, we haven't. And maybe that may be sign for something that, the leadership team or faculty staff should do. But having it be contextualized with some historical data or with a target may give us a sense of where we're going, as opposed to kind of a snapshot.
Right. The needle actually has gone up. We know that through the work of the President's Diversity Council, and there is a concerted effort now through HR. In fact, one of the things that we'll do as a working group is we plan to interview our new HR leader and find out what her recruitment plan is in terms of diversifying our faculty and staff so that there's better representation of all people.
Okay, so this is a really bad idea because it requires more work from me. But, we could look at, we've got data about where our students come from. We might be able to map by census tract, to preserve anonymity, but we might be able to map by census tract what the sending area demographics are and then compare them to, what our demographics are like. Just a thought.
Okay. So are you offering? I'm
You're hired.
kidding.
Looking at this from a trajectory standpoint.
Right.
And especially what your target, it might show that we've got some ideas to how to determine even what the hell our target market really is, demographically, and then show that we've got some data that suggests, oh yeah, this is what we're trying to do or what we're trying to achieve.
We do have the data. 2013 to 2018. So we could plug that right in.
Oh, we do. Okay. So In 2000, oh, that's not good.
We have to work on it,
Yes, we have to work on it.
as a university, yes.
Yeah. We have gone up somewhat in the Latino, but not so much in other areas. There's work to be done. And we know that there's work to be done.
Okay? Thank you.
So all right.
afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Okay, so I appreciate everyone who's here. My name is Cheryl Swider. This is my co-chair, Denise Branchizio. We worked on Standard 5, and I am going to present to you the work that our group did. Now, I know they got kudos in the last group, but my group did the most work, just so you know. Just saying. So anyway, before we go on, I am going to, how many people here are new to this session? Okay, so you've heard the introduction before. But for purposes of someone who in the 11th hour can't sleep at night and says, let me look at Standard 5 on the YouTube video, I am going to start from the beginning. So you're going to hear the timeline again. You're going to hear everything again. But I will smile through it, and if you smile through it, we'll get to the part where all our hard work went. So Middle States is coming, 2020. We will be assessed, and we have the 7 standards that we will be looked at through the lens of the accrediting body, which kind of is good for me because I'm all about accreditation and assessment. So I don't know how Sue picked who does what, but I'm sure that had something to do with why I'm on Standard 5. So we heard about ethics and integrity, support of the student experience, and now Denise and I are going to talk to you about educational effectiveness assessment. But I need to be clear, when we talk about this, don't think of it as we are assessing what people are doing, right? We're not assessing that. We are assessing the process of what goes on here at the university, okay? Because a lot of people get a little antsy that when we went around and when my colleagues and team members went out, that we were assessing what was being done by that particular group, program, administrative team. That's not it. We're just looking for the process. And as Aaron asked last session, how can you prove what we're doing? Is it just volume? Is it what is written document? Or can we actually prove what we're doing? What evidence do we have? So that's what we're about. What evidence do we have to prove that we are effective in assessment? Any questions on that right now? Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Is Standard 5 about educational effectiveness, or is it about... Is Standard 5 about educational effectiveness, or is it about the assessment of educational effectiveness?
It's about the assessment of educational effectiveness.
And it actually says that. That's MSCHE.
So then I answered that.
That's not you making it up or anything.
So then I was correct, right?
I'm just checking.
All right, that's good. So I always love a little check and balance. That's good. Okay, so that's what we looked at. And here's the timeline. I'm sure this is brand new to everyone, right? We've never seen this slide before. So, same thing happened in 2018, January. We were notified, we volunteered, and I must say, Denise has asked me how many times does this project get off our plate, and I tell her, we've been on it for 14 months now, we only have 12 months to go. So she's really happy because I taught her how to color code her little iPhone so she knows it's about Middle States. So we started, people volunteered to be on our committee. We met with Sue and Fran and Tracy to come up with and help with talk about the proposal. They did all the hard work, sent it in the Middle States, sent it back to us and told us what changes needed to occur. That was when Denise and I looked at each other and we said, can we resign? And they said, no, it's going to be easy. So Denise, it's been easy so far, right? Extremely, yeah. At any rate, draft 1, we completed in September. Then we completed the second draft, went up to the powers that be, and once again, I'll tell you, that was like Sue, Tracy, and Fran. I used to like them, but now it's like, I pass them in the hall and just like, say hi. Sent it back to us, and now we're here, open meeting. But I must say, in the meantime, that my team went out and researched evidence and evidence and evidence. Denise and I would take it back, we'd talk about it, we'd put it in a document that no one saw, thank God, and then we go, this doesn't make any sense. So then we'd go back to one of our team members again and say, could you go find this again and tell me what you mean? We met as a group probably 5 or 6 times in person to throw around our draft, our documents, and our evidence. We had evidence inventories by date because we asked people to go back, speak to other people, and bring us more information. So, Denise?
As Cheryl had said, our standard effectively is just about assessment of student learning and achievement, that it demonstrates the institution that the students have accomplished specific educational goals consistent with their programs of study, their degree level, and it aligns with the institution's mission and appropriate expectations for higher education. I'm from nursing. I live in my nursing bubble over in Rossi Hall. I don't have a lot of friends on campus, but Middle States has introduced me to a whole world here at NJCU of other colleagues and peers, and it's a really great way to meet people. So for those of you that may not be on a committee, I would highly recommend next time we do this, join the Middle States Committee because you will have lots and lots of friends. You want to get this slide? So we have 4 specific criteria areas, and those are looking at specifically all the academic programs that NJCU offers, that they have clearly defined student learning outcome goals, okay? That there is a systematic assessment of program level student learning outcomes throughout the institution, that we use the assessment results and interpret them or look at them related to their degree, to their program, and how we're using those results to improve educational effectiveness. And that there's some type of periodic assessment in the university that assesses the effectiveness of the assessment process overall, which is the biggest one that kind of encompasses our entire standard. So we just wanted to identify our team member, our team members. As Cheryl and I are the co-chairs for the standard itself. Vi Agaskar, she's one of our team members. She's here. Janice Alvarez is one of our alums. She's one of our team members also. Isabel Casais, Ruth Ortiz, Chantel Rivera, Jean Ruggiero, and Danny Schiefler. Just wanted to say thank you for all the hard work. This standard is enormous. I'm not going to say it's the most difficult standard, but it's up there. And our team members have been absolutely phenomenal in gathering evidence and working together. We're a really wonderful, cohesive group. And Cheryl and I just want to say thanks for all your hard work, too. It really helped to put this whole draft together.
Hi, it's me. I'm back. So before we go over them, I would just like to let everyone know that within this document, some of the document is written by each piece of our document has been written by a team member with minor modifications. So Denise and I kind of pulled it together, maybe put things together, and of course the gurus worked on it after that. You know who they are, right? Okay. Fran, Tracy, and Sue. So they worked on it again, but our committee members actually wrote pieces of this document that you're going to see. So when you read the draft or you download it, again, on one of those sleepless nights, and this is what you think you should be reading, because that's probably when you should be reading it, you're going to see some of their work in here. Okay? So the first key finding was NJCU has a system for assessment of student learning and uses the results for continuous improvement of instruction and outcomes. So when we looked at this, when I looked at this, we figured that the key is continuous improvement in instruction. So we looked at it 3 different ways, even more, but mostly we looked at it from a student outcomes, learning outcomes in the programmatic level. We looked at programs overall in the university, if they had continuous improvement. And we also looked at administrative units, how they assessed what they were doing, or what they are doing. So we kind of found out that the university does in fact have assessment in each of those areas. Some of it is more rigorous than others, but as we go through this process, we're finding where there may be gaps and maybe where we can do a better job. So I'm not sure, because each of these key findings, they kind of interrelate with each other. So I don't know if you have a copy of the draft or not, but I will go through them all at once, tell you what we're up to, and then maybe you could ask questions about the process and what we're finding in each of those areas, and we'll go from there, because the data and the statistics and everything we found is in the documents, and I have them highlighted, and I have them on my slides, but they're not in the top of my head, okay? So the second one was NJCU has an organized and systematic process for program-level outcome assessment conducted by faculty to evaluate how students achieve their goals. And I think you probably know that there is a guide that each program can follow, for the guidelines of how to assess their program. So we looked at, is that being done, and how is it being done? Within that area, we've had, we're very closely tied to Standard 3, which will come in a couple weeks. So the two groups work together to produce their documents, because they're Standard 5 and 3 are pretty much married, right? So we have information on that in there. The university is committed to growing a culture of assessment on campus. The university, so when we looked at that through the lens of the administration and the administrative departments. So that has been rearranged, and we collect the data in a program called TK20, where we collect all our data. So the administrative units just started this year to put their data into that program, so we can pull out the data where they will say what their outcome is, what their goal is, how they're going to reach it, and then we're waiting for April to see how they did, because we're not using paper and pencil anymore. Everything is now on computers. So that's where we're gaining our data from. Most of it anyway is from inside this program called TK20. The university is committed to transparency, discussing findings, and supporting the process around assessment. So we have a couple ways we're doing that. We now have the digital catalog online, the website, and institutional effectiveness. I am working to coordinate those 2 documents so that everything is exactly the same. And when I find discrepancies, I can reach out, or I do reach out, to departments. Karen Morgan is in charge of that whole project, so I just have a little piece of it. But transparency, in our last year, we're finding that transparency is, the university is becoming much more transparent, and everything seems to be lining up a little bit better as far as, I want to say, correctness. So that's a good thing. Now, I have questions near general education and program review. And the reason I have that is because we have a lot of information about Gen Ed program review, but they're not finished with their analysis. So I didn't want to put, if you read the document, you will see where we are so far. I know, for instance, in program review, we have the programs that have finished, that have started their review, have had the guests on campus, and they have created an action plan. We have people who are in the middle of that process, and we also have people who didn't start the process who were in the timeline. So I know that the provost's office has given them extra time, so we have a new timeline. By the time this document was due, the new timeline wasn't available yet. So that's not in the document, but that will be in the next iteration of this draft, because just so you know, the taskmasters have us sending in another draft in 3 weeks after today's discussions. So whatever we find from today, we'll put in there, and any information, and like I said, information from Gen Ed and program review has come into the, our committee, but it hasn't been put in there yet for that reason. This was due probably on the 15th. So from the 15th till now, information has come in, but it hasn't made this document. Okay? So, without further ado, I will go to the next question. Now, this is going to be a surprise question. Oh, went the wrong way. Am I going backwards? Here's the surprise question. Evidence. Have anybody seen this question before? Evidence. Is the evidence presented enough to convince reviewers that we meet standard 5? So has anyone here had time to read the document? Okay. So what I will do is I will give you some information, not everything in the draft document, but some of the highlights. So we had the monitoring report in 2017, and the monitoring report talked about transparency. So we talked a little bit about the catalog, still work in progress, but as far as statistics, I think that we have a total of, and don't quote me exactly, it's in the catalog, in the document, 86% of our programs have outcomes attached to them. That's something we didn't have. We needed to have outcomes to say, what do we expect our student to learn on the way out of here, right? So we do have that information. We also have a committee called the PAC Committee. Anybody heard of the PAC Committee? Okay, a few people. Those are the people who don't like me because I chair that and I go around and bother them a lot. That's a Program Assessment Coordinating Committee. That committee right now well, not right now, for the last 15 years, since 2015, has looked at program outcomes. So we help faculty learn, and I shouldn't say learn, but revise maybe outcomes if they're not written correctly, work on a measure that is going to measure that outcome. How are we going to tell that the student is actually learning what we say they're learning? And then they report their results and their action plans in TK20. Now, the reason that we know that's working within the document is because when we pull that out, we can see timelines. We can see that a department has said over 2 years they have been looking at written documentation, students in a capstone project, students' work. And they've decided that only 60% of the students met the outcome the way they had it written for written communication. So that being said, this particular department has decided to change a little bit within their curriculum. So in a 100-level course, they added a writing assignment of maybe 2 pages, I don't remember exactly, and then in their sophomore year, they had another assignment, junior year, so that by the time they got to their senior capstone project, they were familiar with the writing process and the rubric that was used to assess our students' learning in that particular area. We've had, I'm just going anecdotally off the top of my head, but it is in, and I don't even know if I put these in here. I know a program that went through self-study, program review. They changed part of their curriculum as well as their rubric. So they went through their self-study. They met with their committee members. They changed part of their curriculum, if I understand correctly, and they also changed the rubric to assess what's going on. They looked at it after program review. It took them about, I want to say, a semester to sit down and do all that. They changed it by that spring, and they have implemented the next year. So when we look at timelines, and we see if they closed the loop. Have they changed it or haven't they changed it? That being said, PAC, and this is how we looked at university-wide assessment. The last one Denise mentioned, assessing the assessment process. So let's say for PAC, after everyone submits, we have a rubric that we look at every single department. We sit around and talk about it as PAC members, and we give them feedback, so we close the loop. Well, this is kind of embarrassing, but what we decided this year was our rubric wasn't a best practice rubric. We had, best practice says you have to have 4 performance systems. We had 5. So when you have that, you automatically know that most people put it in the center. That's a bet. So you never want to have a 5-point rating system. You always want to have a 4 or 6. It's like, oh my God, first of all, we messed that up. Second of all, we had another issue with the rubric. Point being, we sat down, assessed ourselves, we made a change in that university process. So that is going on. Other assessment processes, like I said, we're going into, we take a lot of our assessment, collect all the data in TK20, so we can run different reports to see what we're doing. So program level outcomes for students, PAC does that. The other thing they take from there is, we found maybe a year ago that when they submitted rubrics weren't meeting the best practice. So we presented workshops to the campus, the committee, on developing rubrics. And some people in this room were at that workshop. We are looking this year, we sat down and looked at what we found, and we found that the rubrics we're getting a grasp on rubrics here at the university. But now our measures aren't necessarily coincide with what the rubric said. So at the program level, we found that that's something that probably needs to be addressed. And we also found that as we're starting to address that, we're going to present workshops on that as well as curriculum mapping, so we can go back and find out why the measure's not working. Where's the expectation going wrong? And I don't want to say whose side is it on, but how are we going to fix this so that we have a better chance of our student reaching the outcome we hope for them to reach? So those are the kind of things we do. And the other thing we found, because it's across the university, is that when we looked at university outcomes, in the programs, when we pulled out programs outcomes, the evidence said, we don't have a lot of civic engagement, and that's one of our university outcomes. That being said, when we got gen ed information, we found that that was the lowest outcome identified in gen ed as well. So the university gen ed program assessment program, I don't even know how it came about, I'm just assessing it, right? Came up with what, Denise?
A committee that was established through the university. It's in the second year, so this is the second cohort for it, to try to introduce civic engagement into university programs and curriculum. So how can we better measure, how can we make sure our students are meeting the specific university-wide outcome? So that's one way. So we meet once a month. The goal is to have 20 new civic engagement syllabi ready for introduction into fall of 2019. But some classes, for the first cohort, some faculty members have introduced civic engagement into their classes, so they may have modified their syllabi, introduced civic engagement into their content, into their curricular threads to help match that university or meet that university goal.
So there you see the program outcomes, university outcomes, so you're starting to see them come together, and it's interesting when you actually analyze the data and you look at the evidence, it actually suggests, which I wasn't surprised, but us pleasantly surprised, that that's something that is not addressed across the campus. Gen ed or even within the program itself. So that's an easy one, and quantitative literacy is right next to it in both areas. So those are the kind of things that we are showing evidence of, and we're trying to close the loop by faculty fellows. And I think one of the other interesting things is our group met right before winter break with students. And we asked them about assessment, and we asked them about programs, and we asked them about student learning outcomes. And it was an interesting conversation for about an hour and a half. And actually, we asked them if we could tape it. They said yes. And then we sat down, and I think Jean did it. She analyzed the whole thing, and it just brought me back to my dissertation, so I was just happy it wasn't me, because all that, quantitative, qualitative nonsense, she was doing that. So she brought it all back to us, and here's what we found out. Most students they're not aware of their program outcomes. They may be aware of their course outcomes, but they're not aware of their program outcomes. They were like, we don't even know where to find this. So we took that information, and we came back, and we said, what are we going to do with it? So we took that information, and we went and we asked deans to supply us with a sample of syllabi. They asked, and here's the funny, they go, should we go through it and see if they're on there? I go, no. This is just a random sample, just send it up. So what we found was 12%, only 12% of syllabi identify program outcomes on their syllabus. And I'm not saying we should do it or we shouldn't do it, but 12% of the random sample had program outcomes on their syllabus. They did have student learning outcomes, a much higher percent, like I don't remember that off the top of my head, but I remember the 12%. So the question is, do we want to, as a community, is that important, and should we make that on the template for syllabi? I don't know. Those are the kind of questions that we're struggling with and recommendations we're going to make. So we are definitely able to analyze the assessment processes here on campus, and that is in the document pretty much. And what the university could do to improve anything related to Standard 5, here's the question we're at. So, any questions, any comments, anything you think we should do? What you don't understand, what I tried to say and I didn't say? If my ADHD got away from me, whatever, let me know. Okay, you're going to make it really tough for Denise and I and my committee to write the next draft. You need to say something, or I won't be able to get loud back in Sue's office.
So I just have a factual question, and that is, Gen Ed has its own rubrics for evaluating the learning goals. Are those the rubrics that you use to assess how things are going there, or do you use a different rubric? Or
to assess Gen Ed?
To assess, well, not so much to assess Gen Ed, but
other programs.
Assess its role in the overall work that you're doing.
So, are you asking if we have a rubric to assess?
No.
Rubrics? Is that? No.
When you're drawing...
Gen Ed uses the value rubrics.
It uses its rubric. It has its rubrics from the AA, whatever.
Right.
And so that was just my question.
Yes, so Gen Ed uses its value rubrics.
Right.
And then it has another rubric by tier, right?
That's right.
And so then we see where the student fits in its tier.
Right. So in
So program assessment, those are made by, the rubrics are made by the program chair committee. They're individual rubrics that address the specific topic. Like if you wanted oral communication in security studies or written communication security studies, they have specific things they do because of the nature of their program. They might write it a little bit differently than the written document in sociology, right? So each rubric within the program has its own little nuances based on what it's trying to draw from its students.
Right, right. So that I understand. I was just wondering whether you were using their rubrics when you were evaluating how students were doing.
Yes.
Yeah,
So,
that was my question.
okay, so then they upload their rubric into TK20,
Right?
and then we look if the rubric, right, that's the tool, matches the outcome. So, back a couple minutes ago, I mentioned that we are going to do a little workshop on outcomes and measures so they can get married a little bit closer than they are right now, because sometimes we'll look at the rubric and we'll look at the rubric and we'll go, the rubric, okay, so they did well here, but they didn't reach the outcome. This is what the outcome says. So the score in the rubric is disconnected a little bit from the outcome. Does that answer the question? Yes, it does. Okay, yes. Are you sure? Okay, so that's how we are closing that particular loop, because when we sit there as the PAC committee at the end of the year, we look at every single thing. You know, I have to buy pizza and all that stuff, and we all go in there and go through it. And by the way, one other thing we did, when we started this back in 15, folks put their outcome and their measure and their target benchmarks in TK20 in October. And then we asked that they complete the results and the action plan by the end of the school year. Well, that didn't work for everyone because some people, their capstone project might have been in the spring, they didn't have enough time, blah, blah, blah. So it took us a long time. And we sent out surveys in my 4 years. We sent out 2 surveys to folks who are the PAC contact. So we changed that. So now it's from October to October. So we gave them an entire year, and then so that they could have met with their program, they could have discussed it, what their action plan is, and that's how we can draw a timeline that it's working in program assessment. Well, I think, well, thank you. But anyway, PAC is, I think it was Sue's baby. She did that when she first got here, back in, I don't even know when. And we kind of got on board at the same time, and because of my background as a high school principal, I had to hand something in, and she called me over and said, like, dude, this is assessment. I go, I know. Who knew? So that's how, because I've done it for years, so that's what I've done. So it can be done across gen ed, it could be done across everywhere, and like I said, right now we're even using it in the administrative units to find out how's it going. So that's what we're doing. Yes?
Are student learning outcomes ordinarily a part of program review? Because it seems like you bifurcated them.
Okay, so student learning a part of the program review process?
Yes.
I would think people who have gone through program review, the student learning outcomes should be identified within the program, and then as it goes through its process, you would be looking at the program and see if you are meeting the needs of the students and if something changed, right? Or if you need to make a change. This is the time when you're supposed to be self-reflective and say, gosh, we can do a better job, or you know what, we're doing really, really well here, but maybe we should make changes here. And where should we make those changes? Should we make it in the curriculum? Should we make it in modifying only a few courses? Do we change it in the syllabus and spend more time on it? Those are the things program review we sit back on. Oh, and let's not forget that some of our programs are accredited.
Right, I was just going to say, in nursing, our programs are accredited by CCNE. So we do a whole, almost middle states evaluation on ourselves every 5 years. And our reviewers come in and they look at what will our students accomplish by the time they graduate? How, will they pass their licensure exam? How do they meet these specific goals and outcomes? And we go back to each independent or each individual syllabi from the time they onboard with us. Our program's a year long, 3 semesters. for our accelerated program. So we look at every individual student learning outcome, how it relates to our programmatic outcomes, and then we have it threaded through into the university outcomes. So ours have to match on 3 different levels, in addition to specific QSIN competencies that our profession requires. So we have on our syllabi that we submit, we do have our programmatic outcomes, but that's required through our accreditation process. So a lot of the students that have so someone coming in undecided or just taking a course in biology, they haven't declared a program. So for us to list programmatic outcomes on every single syllabi, if we're not sure where they're going, see, for us, we're program specific, so it's easy to identify where they're going to end up. So that's where the issue is with programmatic outcomes on syllabi altogether. So how do we let the students know? When we met with that group from student government, yeah, we don't know what our programmatic outcomes are. They're not listed on a syllabus, but are they discussed by faculty as they declare a major, as they're moving towards the end of their time here at NJCU? How is that information articulated to them? So we need to find a better process for that, because that's required from Middle States. So how do they know they met their programmatic outcomes? When they graduate, are they able to do X, Y, and Z? If it's not written down for them and it's not handed to them, how else are we going to communicate and disseminate to them by the time they graduate? We know what the expectation is, but do they really know what the expectation is? We have to kind of cross that chasm that we've kind of found that's a missing gap for us.
And one more thing. There are some programs that are accredited that still go through our process in PAC, where they put in their signature assignment and they just put in there so that they can pull all the data out so we can run the report. For instance, I'll use music. They're accredited by MSCHE. Yeah, no. Okay, so they're accredited, but they also go through our process that we use for program assessment. And some do not, because it's a big workload, it's a big haul. I don't think it's anything other than that, but for the people who are going through accreditation with the accrediting body, that's like Denise said, that's a mini kind of Middle States. And then to ask them to do what we do with every program on campus is just another added thing. Couple programs do it. It's not required, but they do it. Yes, Nurdan.
I have a question. For a new program, academic new program proposal, when we submit to get the approval for the Academic Issues Committee and then the New Jersey Presidential Council, one of the main things, they look at the programmatic assessment. And then the second things, they look for how those programmatic assessments are aligning with the university's strategic goals. And are we also assessing or putting those parameters into our report?
That's a good question. I don't think we looked at that, did we? Look, Vi's shaking her head, so I know we didn't look at it. So Vi's going to write that down, but we will look at that, and that's how we can see. So what I understand you saying is if we pull out the program, but I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, that would be a perfect for program review, right? Yes. So, for instance, when I get all the data from program review, that should be able to be the analysis from program review that I will then pop into. Yeah. And the reason Vi's shaking her head, because she was in charge of program review part of the draft. So when you get that information out of program review for standard 3, send it to us and we'll add it to our assessment piece, right? So I just want to be clear, like now we know, right? The assessment is not the assessment of what's going on, it's the assessment of the process. Yes?
No, you're doing great. And to build on what Nurdan said, I think that new AIC form she's talking about, it goes back a couple of years, so a few new programs. I remember we just got ours through finally, and there was a section where you're supposed to show how your program goals are going to support the university kind of strategic plan goals. So I remember what we did, it showed clear support of, let's say, 4 of the NJCU mission
Right,
goals
so
or something.
the interesting thing is, and I don't think it's a misconception, I just think sometimes it's out there, that in our strategic plan, we have 6 specific goals, right? That outcomes for our students. I'm not going to name off the top of my head, but I know there's 6 of them. So, I think the interesting thing is that we need to, as our group, we need to show, whether it's through program review, student outcomes, accreditation, take all of that kind of stuff, and we have to show that we are meeting those outcomes for our students. So every single student that graduates from NJCU should be competent in those 6 areas, not 2, not 4, not 1, all of them. So that's, I kind of, when we talk about it, that's going to be our next step, but we're still waiting for a little bit more information from Gen Ed and program review to tie that all together. You know, it's a large undertaking, but I mean, I'm sure we're going to do it, but I think that's the other interesting thing. I'm not sure, as far as assessment, it may not lend itself, I'm going to say this, and I'm probably going to make it ass myself. I'm going to assume that quantitative literacy is not done a whole lot in the English department. So we better be able to somehow know that maybe quantitative literacy is being picked up somewhere else with that person who may be an English major. How is that going, and are we meeting that? Those are the kind of assessment questions that we're dealing with. And how are we going to move forward with it? Yes, yes. I'm going to do better this time. I'm going to pay attention.
No, I hope to be more articulate this time. When you do your assessments, do you separate out the experience of first-time, full-time freshmen and transfer students? So when you say at the end, that
No.
at the end of the program, 60% of students are proficient in writing.
No, they don't do that. I do not believe in student learning outcomes in the program. Those students are not separated out. Let's say every security studies person that comes through, or fire science person, they do their capstone project in the 400 level course, and it is what it is. I'll just ask a question. Anna, do you know they don't separate anyone out, right? No. I don't think so. I don't know anybody else in a program. Fran? No. So our programs, we don't separate anyone out. But what would it matter if we're graduating that student in the sense of, did they meet? Did they meet the outcome or not? What for purposes of research and what we're going to do in programs or offerings, or who was up here? John Melendez with.
Standard 5, but might have everything to do some standard on retention, or where we drop.
Right. So that's where, so all of these are separated out. All of our standards are separated out, but the whole thing is a program review. So yes, so that's a good question. Do we want to look at that maybe in Gen Ed? Maybe we do. Or maybe in program, maybe we do. And then we can look to the resources and what we're going to do about it. But right now, at the program level, we don't tease that out.
So I am in the English department, and
Okay, so don't grade me on my English, okay?
You're pretty good at quantitative literacy.
Okay, so maybe, see, that was a wrong assumption I made then.
Well, no, you never said that we couldn't do math,
Oh,
just
okay.
that we didn't. It would be interesting to the English department, which teaches the comp courses, how the result of its work was holding up through the university. You know, or whether in terms of program development, we might be looking at not so much the English department adding something, but you talked about the program which adjusted what it did in its courses. It added writing at different levels within the program. You know,
Correct.
that might, in the end, be an interesting university-wide discussion at some point.
Okay.
So that's where I was coming from.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, yes, Bill?
I just have a question. Am I supposed to load up some rubrics? I don't remember I had to load
I
up.
mean, are you behind again this year?
And yeah.
No.
I think I didn't submit some stuff that would have been helpful, so I guess I better do that.
No, you're good. You're all caught up for this year, don't worry.
I got
You
some
would
new
know about it.
outcomes.
Any other questions, comments? If you think of anything that we could do for planning moving forward, I'm sorry, I don't know your first name. Barbara, I know Vi, I saw her taking notes, so I know Vi has it down. She's helping me out with any questions and suggestions from now. So we'll bring it back to our committee and see what shakes out in the recommendations. Yes, thank you. Anyone else?
You're data-driven, just be clear you are data-driven. Look at the data and see if there's anything we can do to improve. I mean, if there's any area where we're getting the data, this is the place. I think
Right,
it's
so I
wonderful.
think back when John started, 3 hours ago, and I thank you all for still being here, when John spoke, we're looking for, if there are awards, because I can guarantee you, when I was a high school principal, if people came in for accreditation, if you gloss over anything, they're going to find it. So you can't do that, right? You can't just say, hey, here we are, we're all great. We need to take this serious and say, what are we going to do? What did we find? Maybe we do find the first year experienced student needs, and that's affecting our outcomes in the senior year. Maybe we are finding that. But if you think of anything, just send it in. There's a link, send it to me, send it to Denise, send it to anybody on my committee. You saw it up there. Because Middle States is going to find the missing link. So, and here is, I guess March 22nd, we'll be discussing the other 3 of the 4 standards that are left. So maybe you could attend 1 or 2, that would be perfect.
Here, this room?
Yes, this room. Thank you very much.